Hello and welcome back to the Solo RolePlayers podcast. I'm your host PJ, and today on the show, I am very excited to talk to you a little bit about a game that has changed the way that I play old school stuff and the way that I play published dungeons. That game is Old School Essentials. So before I go into how this has changed the way that I play this style of game, I'll just talk a little bit about what it is. Now, I am absolutely no expert on this stuff. I was not around in the hobby when the whole thing started, when the original D&D stuff came out. I never had any particular history with D&D before getting into solo play, and as such, I don't really have any nostalgia for the old school stuff necessarily, and certainly the main thing that I don't have is any awareness about all of the little differences and bits and pieces and the history and progression of role-playing games, as it were, from this original style thing to all of the other OSR clones and things that are out there. So there is plenty of information online if you want to go find out more about this nitty-gritty specifics of what Old School Essentials is and exactly what it emulates and whatnot. But taking it with a grain of salt, my understanding is that Old School Essentials is a very faithful recreation of the original basic and expert versions of Dungeons & Dragons. If that wasn't confusing enough, and if there wasn't enough options, I mean, there's BECMI, there's AD&D, there's OD&D, all these other terms that get thrown around, which don't mean all that much to me because I wasn't around in that sort of progression. But if that wasn't bad enough, Old School Essentials itself has, ironically, while succeeding in being a very, very clean, clear, easy to understand system, ironically, it also is quite confusing currently to figure out within the Old School Essentials system what is what, because there is a number of different editions, releases, styles, that kind of thing. However, it's not going to make a huge difference because Old School Essentials, or rather Necrotic Gnome, have just recently announced that they are going to be re-releasing the whole system in a one product line. At the moment, I think there's 3 separate product lines, or 4 even, and something along the line of 12 books or something like that. And they are going to sort of refine that. As little as it is my baseline understanding of Old School Essentials and what it is, I can credit and thank the fantastic Everweird over at Everweird's World YouTube channel and website. What it comes down to, in my understanding, is there is a rules tome, which is a single book covering both the player's guide and the GM guide from the BX Dungeons & Dragons. Just the basic version of Dungeons & Dragons, all in a single book. There is then the Old School Essentials Advanced Fantasy series, which is 2 books, a player's tome and a referee's tome, and that has all of the rules that the basic has in it, but the additional rules that were added into D&D from the expert edition, I think, you guys probably know more than I do about this. I originally started playing this with the advanced books, and then when I was away traveling and I didn't have them with me, and I really wanted to play, I happened to find a copy of the rules tome, not really understanding the difference, but really appreciated actually that I can have that all in a single book. And when I'm away or traveling or don't have much table space or that kind of thing, I think I'm quite happy just having a single book like that. And if I want to get into more of those other bits and pieces added in the expert stuff, I have the advanced things behind me. Today, what I'm going to talk about is what it is about Old School Essentials that unlocked playing published dungeons and dungeon crawling in general for me in solo roleplay. Something that I've been struggling with since the beginning, basically. Since I pretty much my very first Shadow Dark episode, which was something like 18 months ago at this point, and I found that the brain load required to sort of pre-make a dungeon and then fill it in with things on the fly, also while trying to play the characters and imagine the space around me. It was just too much to be fun, and I just felt like I was doing too much of the work when generating that dungeon myself. And so it was through watching Everweird's videos that I realized maybe it is the published adventures that I want to play, and so I thought I would just sit down and give it a go. Having watched Everweird play essentially without using a solo system like Mythic or Plot Unfolding Machine or any of the oracles or solo systems that we use, essentially without using that at all, and essentially just using a very, very simple yes/no oracle. And so that made me very curious as to what it is about this system that makes it simpler to run solo, and especially running published adventures. One of the things that Old School Essentials is constantly praised for is its readability and its layout. The fact that these rules that I understand were quite hard to pass and sort of get your head around, let alone reference and things. Again, that's just hearsay. I haven't actually looked at the original stuff myself, but that's my understanding of it. And this book is often praised for completely fixing that problem by having a super clean, clear layout for absolutely everything, striking that incredibly difficult balance between making it easy to learn the game, but then once it's learned, also easy to reference things over and over again as you go on playing. One of the key things that I'm learning in solo play, and something that Old School Essentials does, at least in part, is those elements of player facingness in the mechanics. Any time that you can look at your character sheet and know what it is you have to roll, that makes a huge difference in solo play. As soon as I have found, at least, and that's something I fell down a little bit with Shadow Dark, as soon as you are constantly forced to choose a difficulty for something first, like an AC, something like that, straight away you're already put in the position where you need to make more decisions. And it's a slippery slope with solo roleplay. For me at least, I find if too many decisions are asked of me, I feel like I'm no longer playing the game and I'm just sort of pretending or making it up as I go along, if that makes sense. It's an odd thing to communicate and to explain. I do like making decisions, but I like making decisions based on information that I already have, right? So if I know, and take this as an example, right? If I want to, say I'm in a position where I can either try and, we're being chased by goblins in a dungeon, we can either try and brute force a door to push it through and close it, or let's say brute force a rock and try and push up a big boulder to block the door behind us, or we can run and jump over a slightly fallen bridge. In that case, I have two choices. I like that decision. Do I push the rock, knowing that my strength is whatever it is, or do I jump the bridge, knowing what my dexterity is, whatever it is? The point where that falls down for me, though, is that I have to then make a decision. How big is this rock? How heavy is it? What's the DC going to be? How big is the gap in the bridge? What's the DC for that going to be? And then that's that one extra point of decision where it falls apart for me. In Old School Essentials, as in Dolmenwood, as in Dragonbane, when you have a player-facing system, it means that you can see the stat on your sheet and you know your target straight away. So in this case, I'm looking at one of my characters in my party, who's Abalea, a human cleric, and she has a strength of 9 and a dexterity of 8. That means I can then choose, am I going to jump the bridge? Am I going to push the rock? And then I can just roll under that number. And that one step less of decision making makes a huge difference to me in the flow of play. The next thing that I want to talk about, which makes this particularly good for me to play solo and to play published adventures, is the layout of the published adventures themselves. Solo-friendly layout is something that I really hope is going to become a much more common consideration in the design space. I believe it will. I am responding to questionnaires from game designers about would you like this, and I'm talking to them and saying, hey, have you thought about solo-friendly layout? I don't know exactly what solo-friendly layout is until I see it necessarily, but I think as a community we should sort of come together and figure out what is best for us, and that could just become a standard when people do it. It doesn't affect the way that they're making their games, but it does make it easier for us to play. As for games that are not at all designed for any sort of solo play, the Old School Essentials adventures, the dungeons, mostly dungeons as far as I can tell, which is what I want out of this old school style play, are about as good as they can get without being specifically designed for solo. Part of that is lots of space between sections, in terms of like lots of space between the descriptions of various rooms. Things are very clearly labeled. I'm looking here at the incandescent grottos. You get on the end pages the full map that doesn't have any information on it much other than keyed numbers for the rooms or the caves or rooms or whatever. And then in the area descriptions, you have a very clear, a cleanly cut off, a cleanly laid out description of those rooms. And this is something that's very important, the way it's laid out. The less that the details and the nuances and the consequences of what is happening in that dungeon are all tied together in text, the better. For example, and few spoilers for the Incandescent Grottos if you haven't played it. I might even try, or at least demonstrate a couple of rooms in this later, but not too much. It's not going to ruin it for you. I will do very early rooms so that it can just perhaps get you excited about playing it rather than ruining it for you. So, as an example, and I might go straight into demonstrating how I do this now. The very first area in the Incandescent Grottos is number 1, Swimming Simians. There is a paragraph at the top which has bolded words of features. This is already key because as a solo player, I can, if I don't want to know too much about it, trying to keep that balance between some surprise, but while also having it make sense and be coherent and that kind of thing. I can scan across and I can just see natural cavern, open to the sky, rough stone stairway, misty waterfall, tranquil pool, sandy beach, bubble moss. And I can stop reading. I can then, as I have been doing, copying out the room in my notebook, and then making some decisions about what my characters are going to do when they go in there before continuing to read and see what happens. Now, it's not perfect, but that doesn't matter. The reason that doesn't matter so much is what I have naturally started to do is to be running a full party with less narratively complete characters, like not characters with backstories that I'm married to and that sort of stuff, and rather treating it as an entire party as itself. I've made up a sheet which has 4 character slots on it. And Everweird has one of these as well. You can check that out at Everweird World. So on my sheet, I have 4 character slots, and then I have summarized the probabilities of things like encounters, movement speed, adventuring skills, all that. I have just put the highest value of each of the party members in that. So I'm basically looking to my individual characters at what they're doing, but if we need to run away or something, I'm assuming we're generally sticking together, and so we run at the slowest person, for example. However, we pick locks at the best person, that kind of thing. The other thing that I've done to this character sheet, which helps me strike this balance, is I've given each character, and I'm developing this idea still, but I've given each character a word or two, which kind of just describes the kinds of decisions they might make or the kind of people that they are, so that I'm not making 4 decisions every single turn for every single character, but rather I can sort of role play them essentially and boil that role play, their role, down into a single word or 2 words and help that inform what they might do. In this case, for example, I have selfish and traps. Selfish is this person is selfish, so that is going to be their motivation for doing things. They're a chaotic human acrobat in this case. And traps that's their standard behavior. They're always going to be looking for traps. This is something that comes out of DM Yourself, I believe, which I never fully read, but just sort of skimmed over, and that's one of the things that stuck in my head. I have another guy who is a human knight, and I have honor as their sort of characteristic, and then first in as their standard behavior, right? So they're always going to be front of the marching order if they can. I then have a druid, and that is do no harm, and then the other words are environment and last. So they're always last because they're, as it is played out in my games, they're always picking mushrooms or moss or this kind of thing, and they're always sort of dawdling along at the back. And then finally, I have Ribble, who is a coward and greedy. So I know that that's not a real standard for which word does what, but that's enough for me to just sort of figure out what each are likely to be doing in any sort of a dungeon turn. The next thing that helps me with this is I use my oracle, my yes oracle, which gives a flavor of sort of a hot or cold flavor, as it were, a outward facing, inward facing flavor, a aggressive, impulsive, so on so forth for red, and a defensive, introverted thing from blue die, right? If you guys have been listening for a while, you've heard about this before. It's not absolutely not necessary. It works for me. But what it does is just when I do want to know the answer for something, that little bit of flavor can help me picture what's going on and just spark my ideas. To give you an example of this, let's just say that this party is going in. We're going into this first room. So I'm going to talk about my process of how I would actually, or how I have started to actually go through and solo a published dungeon like this. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is open the book. Then I'm going to just read a sort of skimming carefully in case there's big spoilers or something like that. Again, part of the thing is being okay with being spoiled. It's you have to accept, or I have found I've had to accept the fact, and it's not even a bad thing. Not accept is the wrong word. I am embracing the fact that I get to both have the cool experience of reading a dungeon for the first time that a game master gets and learning about all the cool stuff that's coming up and they're going to be able to throw their characters at. That's a cool, fun thing to do. And I'm embracing the fact that I get to still create a story with these characters, see what they do, still make some decisions for them, and watch how it plays out with these characters who I then slowly get attached to until they die horribly. So, with that in mind, I read through about the adventure. The Incandescent Grottos presents a low-level adventure location in the classic vein, a small section of the mythic underworld where the surface world logic recedes and magic and monsters abound. That's enough to give me a bit of an idea what it is. Okay? Then I'm just sort of scanning over this. It says characters level 1 to 2. Good. That's good to know. I can read a little bit about that. It says, as the adventure is in the old school style, not all encounters are intended to be balanced to the PC's capabilities. Judicious use of stealth, parley, and trickery are to be encouraged in place of blindly rushing into combat. Also good advice for me, the solo role player. Then it says, the Mythic Underworld. The Mythic Underworld is a generic term for those subterranean realms beyond the comforts of everyday life where danger and adventure abound. The Mythic Underworld, so on and so forth, okay? You get that. Reading a little bit about it so we get a bit of a feel for the flavor. Then what I might do is make a note of the factions involved. And again, this is where the layout comes really in handy. So I see, again, big clear headings: history, dungeon factions, relationships, monster reactions, harvesting crystals, the underground river. What I might do now is just note down what the dungeon factions are without reading too closely about what they do. Troglodytes, rogue prismists, Dream Dragon, Ooze Cult, and Necromancer, okay? But not looking at where they are or what is actually in there. And then maybe I can fill in those details as I go. And so on and so forth. You can see what it is you want to read. Let's just sort of move into this first room, and I'm just going to see if I can transfer to you, the listener, what is going on in my head while I'm doing this. This is not something I have sat down and made notes on how I now solo roleplay published adventures with Old School Essentials. I just kind of do it. So I'm going to do my best to try and give you access into my thought process while I do that, because I hope that's helpful to you. I think something that has frustrated me for a long time is this wealth of cool stuff going on in adventures that we can feel locked away from as the solo role player a little bit. So coming back to our first room, first I'm going to sort of set up a scene. Now when I say set a scene, I'm not doing that in the mythic sense, but rather I'm just establishing a picture in my head of how the adventure is starting, right? I'm not testing the scene. I'm not doing anything like that. It's not set in stone. It's just me sort of trying to ground myself. So I'm now going to go through and just first decide where I'm coming in from. And this is where I will draw out this part of the room with its exits and whatnot. And I'm not going to look at what those exits are until my characters decide to go and investigate them. So I draw out this little map and I can see that there's a staircase there coming down. And I'm thinking, okay, all my characters, we have our big, brave, or stupid honor knight who's always first in, Arthea. And Arthea is, saying, I've got a coward in the group as well, so I'm imagining the coward is probably sticking as close as he can to Arthea. That's Ribble. And so Arthea is saying, everyone, follow me. I've got it under control. And Ribble is then staying behind him. And they're going down the steps. And as we saw from our druid, they are sort of looking at things as they go. So I imagine them walking down these steps here. And now, in this particular room, I can see that we have a large pool. We have the number 1, which is referring to the area number. And we have the monsters involved, which are monkeys. Okay? So before I read any further, I can see that we have an entry within this number 1 room, which says chirruping monkeys. So as we start sort of wandering down there, I'm imagining we're not being very sneaky because our leading knight Arthea is not very sneaky. So because I have seen that these monkeys are chirruping, I'm assuming that we're going to hear them before we see them. So my first question is, and I'm going to use this to ask an oracle, not because the answer is that important, but because the flavor will help me build this scene and what's happening in my mind. I've seen that these monkeys are chirruping, again, so we're going to hear them before we see them. My question is, using my oracle, which is heavily weighted towards yes, do we hear the monkeys before we see them? Or rather, let me think of what is more likely. In my head, I'm thinking, and it's a little bit comedic, I think, this Arthea guy, so I'm actually going to ask it the other way. The point of this oracle is not to be fair. The point is that it encourages you to think about what you want to happen and then roll on that. And then it's more likely to happen, but if it doesn't happen, it feels like it's more fated that it didn't. So what I think I want to happen is that Arthea is so bold and knighty that he is stomping down here without any care, and he's wearing heavy armor, so he's probably quite loud. So my question I'm going to ask is Arthea making too much noise to hear the monkeys before we see them? I roll both of these. The way it works, if one of them is under 10, the answer is yes. If both of them are under 10, the answer is yes, and additionally it's positive to us. And the third factor is that which colored die is higher will have that flavor impact that I've been talking about. So in this case, I've rolled a 9 on the blue and a 12 on the red, which means that yes, Arthea is making too much noise to hear the monkeys before we see them. And because it is red, that flavor helps lend a little bit of character to what's going on in my head. He's really, for whatever reason, he is very blasé about this. This is a point where I might look up, and I would have done this before, why we came down here in the first place. Forgive me if this is scattered. I did tell you this was access to my brain. It's going to be scattered. I'm rolling a d10 to see what rumor brought us here, because there's a list of rumors. It says that these caves used to host human sacrifices. Devils still dwell there. Perfect. So Arthea is coming down on a quest to rid the place of evil, because human sacrifices are the worst thing and devils are bad, and it is very simple. Arthea likes it when there is a very simple reason for things, and that is to crush evil. Happily, he is not very intelligent, but strong. So the fact that I've rolled higher on the red die means that he is stomping down here and he is ready to kill any demon that he sees. Everyone else is sort of following along. They might have their own reasons for being down here. We haven't learned about them just yet. We will through the course of play. But he is stomping down to the point that I think the monkeys are probably going to run away. Now that I've pictured the scene and what my characters are doing, I will now mark off a box on my dungeon time tracker, which is also really useful in old school play and in solo play as well. For each box, you can sit down and decide on actions that everyone's doing loosely, and it pushes you when you're doing the random encounter rolls, all that kind of thing. Great thing. I need to get better in the habit of doing it. But yeah, cool thing. So now that I've pictured what's going on, I'm going to read the next thing of what happens to the monkeys. And it says, cute red cap monkeys. 8-inch tall, brown fur, redheads, lounging, laying in the sand, swimming and splashing playfully, diving to the pool's bottom. And now that I know what we're doing, I can read down to the next thing, which is reaction, which is they will passively observe PCs, shriek and flee at loud noise or violence. So as we start coming around the corner, we hear a shriek as these monkeys get scared off by my clattering, clamping Arthea, and they're going to run away. My next question to the Oracle is, are we going to see where they go? I think it's more interesting if we do, so I'm going to roll. Are we going to see the monkeys as they leave? The answer is yes, this time the blue being higher. Now, this little bit of flavor helps direct my brain. It's almost like a little mini Spark table. I mean, it's not a table, but like, as I'm playing this, I'm sort of learning why this stuff works for me as I go. Thank you out there, solo roleplay listeners, where you can all be my solo roleplay therapy guinea pigs as I figure out what is going on in my head and why I do what I do in this hobby. I think this extends from my my sense die that I've been using since the beginning, which also may have come from DM Yourself. And that is where whenever I feel like I'm too much in the GM brain and want to know what's going on down in the PC level of things, I roll a d6 and I go sight, smell, sound, taste, because I rolled a 4. And then I just try and picture or imagine how that word fits into the experience of my characters. If I roll taste now, I might say, okay, they taste something in the air. And then I might look, scan through the area and see if there's anything there that would make sense, for example. I think this Yes Oracle is sort of a natural progression of that. And that is that forcing me to take a very simple feeling, idea, word like passive, defensive, considered, conniving, cold, considered on the blue die versus the extroverted stuff, ambitious, loud, aggressive, impulsive, all those sorts of things. By being forced to picture how that feeling is impacting my scene and my characters puts me right back down on the ground. It really works for me. So I asked the question, do we see where they go? Or do we see them as they leave? And I get cold and considered. So that means that they, in my head, that forces me to picture the way in which they are leaving and therefore build the scene a little bit better in my head. If it's cold and considered, that to me means that they are not just rushing off in all directions, but they are all going down a well-practiced route of where they go in these kinds of situations. They're organized. They're not just reacting, but rather okay, everyone run, and they know exactly where they go. Now I can read further in what the chirruping monkeys do. If this doesn't make sense to me, I can just do my own stuff. But here it says, if PCs patiently observe the monkey's behavior, I feel like I'm safe to read this now because now we have triggered something that has changed this possibility. We are no longer able to patiently observe the monkeys unless we were to stop and wait for them to come back. That's not exciting. So now I feel safe to read this. If PCs patiently observe the monkey's behavior, they notice the monkey submerge for a long time, eating water weeds, able to breed water, and periodically eat the bubble moss growing on the east wall. So what this means to me, because it was beneficial to us, because both numbers were under the 10, and because it was cold and considered, these monkeys are well practiced in using this underground passage to escape and to get somewhere, and they feel pretty safe doing it. And it also means that they are eating this water weed and being able to breathe underwater. So what we're seeing is these monkeys quickly and carefully eating this weed and then all in a line, jumping plop, 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 plop into the water and then disappearing and staying away far too long. Now what I might do is see if any of us are smart enough to figure out what's going on. And this is another reason that the old school essentials and the old school style play works really well for me solo, especially when it's player facing like this. Because I don't need to think that issue you can have in other games of, well, I know this now. I know that if we eat this water weed, we'll be able to breathe underwater, but that feels unfair. That's not interesting that my characters know. because there is such heavy procedure for this kind of stuff, and I'm talking more like, do we look for traps? Can we lock the door or unlock the door? All these kinds of things. Those are outlined on your character sheet. I can say I have a 2 in 6 chance of finding traps, and if I don't find them, I don't find them. Yeah, but we'll come back to that when we come across a trap. So what I'm going to do now is look at the whatever skill from whatever of my people makes most sense, either narratively or based on stats, and see if we notice what it is the monkeys are doing and figure out what that is. Now, the fact that I have a druid with me, and I believe, I'm not going to look up the rules now, but I'm pretty sure it says in the book that druids can automatically identify weeds and stuff. So what I just want to check is, in this case, I do have a decision to make. Either I decide, do I just give this to my druid? In an old school sense, that's probably what would happen. I say, yes, we've seen the monkeys eating this stuff and then jumping into the water. Probably the druid knows. Yeah, and I think that is actually what I would rule for that. Or I could ask the oracle question, leaning towards yes, if I'm pretty sure but don't want to just give it to myself, in which case we would get a no, with the red being higher, which means, and again, this is why this thing is so great, our druid absolutely should know and recognize what these things are eating, but because the red is higher, she is emotionally distracted, she is angry about something, perhaps she is really upset about Arthur and the way how he just stomped into this place and killed some animals who were standing in the way, or stomped on a bird's nest, I don't know, whatever it happened to be, and I could use that to sort of build in this conflict or interest within the interpersonal relationships of these characters. Or the third option is I could just roll on an ability, and I could say, do we have the wisdom to know? I'm not sure if that would be the best use of wisdom, but let's say it is. Do we have the wisdom to know that that's what these things are? And we get an 18. No, we don't. That's probably actually the least interesting one, but it's a way that I could do it. Then I can move into that room and I can continue to explore it and sort of decide what my characters are going to do. I now would cross off another square on my dungeon time tracker and give a little, before I look any further into the book, sort of give a loose outline of what everyone's going to be doing. And so I think that, for example, our druid is just sort of looking around, sort of half distracted. She's not doing anything much. The acrobat is going through and looking for traps under the water, maybe peering down under the water. Our knight is basically standing, looking left and right, deciding which way he wants to go, because he's leading the thing. He doesn't care about the monkeys. They're gone. He wants to keep going. And I could just roll on this. I could use a normal d6 to say which direction he goes, because I can see there is a north and an east. So he's going to go east, and he says, come on, follow me. And he sort of already starts walking, and the coward is just following him along. So that's another turn that's going on there, and so on and so forth. I could now see on this page, it also says that there is a bubble moss, and it says, so if you touch it, whatever, I could see, you get 1 hour of underwater breathing, so on and so forth. I actually think it would be cool if we just gave it to the druid and she says, hey everyone, this bubble moss will help us breathe underwater. We should follow the monkeys. I think that's a more interesting story. Arthur's in trouble. I don't know if he can swim in his armor. That might be an interesting thing to come across. And then I can look at the last thing in this page, which says a troglodyte spy. There's a 3 in 6 chance. And again, this is great. Anytime you see in one of these books, it usually starts with it, there is a 3 in 6 chance. You can just roll on that before you finish reading it, or just read it. It doesn't actually matter. So I got a 4, which means that there is no troglodyte. If there was, they're lurking in the north passageway shadows, and if the piece is spotted, it sneaks to Area 35, alerting its companions, And so you can see how we build this up little bit by little bit. And the reason this works for me, like I said, is this combination of procedure. Say we're in another room and we'll say, well, we have a 2 in 6 chance of finding traps, and yes, our acrobat is always looking for them. We don't find any traps, so we're going to have to trigger a trap. We roll, presumably there's tables in your adventure of what the traps might be. Oops, don't want to look ahead. Man, there's some cool stuff in here. And then because we have the marching order, we say it's most likely that Arthur steps on a trap, but maybe not. Maybe he stepped over it with his big stride. I'll use the yes oracle on that. Was it Arthur that stepped in the trap? That is a yes, and it is a yes with a match, and it is both under. I'm not sure what that means yet in my system, but both under means it's positive. So yes, I think he sets the trap off, but gets lucky with it for whatever reason, depending on what the trap is. Maybe an arrow shoots out of the wall and it just bounces off his arm. Something like that. You can use this to just help flavor it. The reason this works so well for me is just, I feel like I don't feel like I'm having to make too many decisions. I feel like the decisions I'm making are interesting. I'm making decisions not just for the characters, but on what the scene is, what is happening and what the story is, using the roles and the personalities of my characters and the procedures baked into the game. And for me, additionally, the way that I'm recording this when I'm not doing it on mic, this is typically something I probably play off mic, although maybe I will go through and play some more on mic. I find I can't write when I'm playing on mic. I'm too busy talking. What I'm doing in my notebook while I'm doing this is sort of mapping out the dungeon as I go, making notes of things like, hit points and whatever else. And then also, which I've been finding fun, I don't like writing a lot from like journaling type stuff, although if you do, that's great. I'm not against journaling here. Someone came into the Discord recently and said, I'm not sure journaling game fans are welcome in here. I felt really bad about that. Of course, everyone is welcome. Everything is great. If you like it, it's good. But what I found would be cool and a really effective thing that I'm doing is I'm sort of using my notebook as scratch paper to scribble hit points and maybe timing, like a round timer or like whatever else. I'm drawing a little bit of the dungeon, which I think is cool, and maybe where it's relevant, the positions of my characters in that room. And then finally what I'm doing is writing like single sentence in capital letters, like quotes, which kind of sums up what's going on. So in this case, I might write, quick with you, we have demons to slay. And that's sort of, and then quote, Arthur. And that's sort of just enough to sort of add some personality and flavor into the room and help me sort of remember when I go back and look at this, what's going on without writing. Arthur walks heavily down the stairs, making a lot of noise. There's a screech as the monkeys run away from the room. They quickly dive into the water and, I could do all that, but I find I don't need to. And I'm sort of still experimenting with it. It's a new concept, but I'm really liking that. Just a single line quote from the turn or the day or the room or something like that. What's worth noting as well is that the little example that I just took through you there is completely different from how I actually played through those first couple of rooms because of the way that those dice and interpretations turned out. If you want to hear me continuing playing through the incandescent grottos, those episodes will be coming out over on the Patreon feed over the next couple of weeks. I'm now 3 sessions further through that and very slowly making my way through this story, and there's some really cool and interesting stuff in there. So if you want to hear that as I put this, refine this method and sort of put it into actual practice, those episodes are over on Patreon/Solo Roleplayers. Wow, I didn't really know what that episode was going to be about. I did not sit down and prep all the things about OSE. But you know what? Thank you, Solo Roleplayers, for the therapy session, which really helped, talking about this stuff really helped me understand why it is this is working for me. And this is really, really working as a great way for me to play solo. And while this exact style of play is specific to playing with a party with a good, well laid out adventure like this and a procedural game like Old School Essentials, the skills and mechanics and techniques of this kind of solo play that I've just naturally developed, used, be inspired by, whatever it is, these skills and concepts and ideas are transferable to all sorts of solo roleplay. Hey, that was a weird episode. I hope you liked it. I think it was certainly eye-opening to me as to why this sort of works for me. That was kind of Old School Essentials, not really, also mostly insight into my mind of how I actually play a published dungeon using this system. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Solo Roleplayers podcast. The question, as always, is how many times can PJ say, "That's it from me today"? I'll catch you next time on the Solo Roleplayers podcast. Bye.